Good evening. Welcome to Cask Talk. I'm Paul. This is Dave. I am a beer drinker and enthusiast, and Dave here is a certified beer judge and home brewer. But today we are deviating from beer, and we are going with one of my personal favorites, Mead. And this bottle happens to be from Redstone Meadery. See if it can focus. There we go. This bottle is from Redstone Meadery, and I drink this bottle mainly because I am allergic to sulfites. Sulfites are not my friend. They make my stomach unhappy. They make me have a really bad headache, and they make me just really feel in general like crap for the next couple days.
Well, and we can talk about sulfites too in a second. I'm super excited about this because Mead is, I would probably call it one of the oldest alcoholic beverages. And I think that a lot of people state that it's the oldest, though I think that there's a good case that beer may be before it, but they're right back and forth. It has this cool history, and obviously, that Viking history, which I just love history anyways, and the history of drinks and drinking.
Asia,
so
Africa, it's basically a worldwide thing. Anywhere there's honey, you're going to find some version of fermented honey, and that is mead. So
Absolutely. Well, let's talk briefly about sulfites because you mentioned that. Sulfites, if you're not aware of what this is, a lot of people, like Paul, have issues with sulfites.
it's actually the 10th, like 9 or 10 on the most common allergies.
Yeah. So you can have some negative interactions because of the sulfites, and the reason why they use sulfites is because yeast aren't programmed. They just do what yeast do. You have sugar, and yeast goes, I'm going to eat it till I die. And literally, that's exactly what they do. They create a culture, they grow to a massive, like billions and billions of yeast. And then they literally just eat, and turn the sugars into alcohol until there's so much alcohol that it kills them. So this is something that they normally do. But if you're trying to create a specific sweetness in, let's say, a wine or a mead, which is where they're typically used, what'll happen is it'll get to a certain point, and then you'll hit it with sulfites
And kill all the yeast.
and kill the yeast at that point, and it leaves what you would call like a residual sweetness that's left over, and then that would give it a sweet sense to it. Now, any of the home brewers out there, their experiences with this, they know like, well, you can choose different kinds of yeast, and that's exactly what some people do. And you can choose yeast that will die at a certain alcohol level. So if you plan your recipe accordingly, you know it'll get to a certain alcohol level, the yeast will die, it leaves a residual sweetness, therefore you end up with a craft drink without the sulfites. It can become difficult in some scenarios. I think it's a big corporate thing that you do with sulfites. I'm super glad this doesn't have it in it, and I applaud any company that's going to try to make a great drink without having to use sulfites.
Yeah, and the thing is, it really does stabilize the beverage that they're making, so that way when they do the blends, they can get exactly the same thing every time. You can put it in the bottle with the cork for wine, for example, or you can lid the bottle like the Mead has here. And even if this just sits in a dark room for the next 2 years, and the dog is going ape nuts over here.
Yeah, sorry about that.
But
It's also a Viking.
But you can get the exact same flavor because there is no live culture at all. So if you have a wine that's been sitting in a closet for 6 months, it's going to taste exactly the same as when they bottled it. And if you leave don't kill the yeast in it, then there's a potential that the yeast are going to keep going productive. You could end up with vinegar. You could end up with a different flavor of wine. You could end up with all kinds of different stuff.
So yeast have a metabolic schedule in their lives, and part of it towards the end, and one of the things we do in brewing is we'll either drop out of a conical the dead yeast, or we will take the beer off of the yeast and into a new container to let it settle down. And it's really a preservative kind of aspect is what you're talking about, which essentially the yeast will eventually eat themselves, and then they start putting off an off flavor, and just the preservative aspect of it, which companies will use sulfites. I love live culture thing. Paul could attest to this, making live culture hot sauces,
live culture beers,
live culture beer, grow mushrooms. I like anything that has this living element into it, especially from a microbiological level. Probably because I just feel like more connected with nature, and it's a symbiotic kind of relationship that we have.
In order to preserve the flavors in this, what they do is they pasteurize it. So they boil or heat it up to, what was it, like 180 degrees or something, and they do it in the must. They do
Yeah,
it
so before
the
it's fermented.
fermentation process.
So typically when you're making beer, you're going to boil it because it's going to be essentially clean it. There's a lot of things that are living organisms and things like that. There's a lot of other things you're doing in beer as well. You're concentrating the sugars, you're caramelizing sugars, you're also
Well, just the
boiling
boiling
off.
it. That's why they say when you go to a foreign country or whatever, you can drink the beer but not the water.
Yeah.
And the reason is because part of the brewing process is to boil.
Yeah.
So,
So with beer, you're boiling off also what they call volatiles, and these are a lot of like sulfur compounds and different elements that like are in the grains that create off flavors that you can kind of boil away. So with mead, it's made from honey. So when you deal with honey, if you boil it, what you end up doing is a lot of the volatiles that you're blowing off are elements of the honey that you want to maintain.
well, it is a natural preservative.
Preservative by itself. I mean, they've
They
found
found thousands honey that's thousands of years old.
Yeah.
And they've actually analyzed the honey to find out what the agriculture or the wildlife was in the area from
Yeah.
doing it. It's one of those things that we could probably drone on and on and on about
Yeah.
because it's really actually a very intriguing subject. Another one I would highly recommend that if you're bored and start looking up the history of mead and look up the history of honeys in general.
Yeah, there's
and
some
what they
great
found.
books written on it as well. So I'm excited. I love mead. Mead is one of my favorite drinks as well. I'm not as probably big of a mead connoisseur as Paul.
Oh, I love this
I
stuff.
tend to have friends that make great meads, and I can think of a few of you guys out there. Hopefully you're watching and subscribing.
Hint, hint.
Hint, hint. I love your guys' meads, even if you aren't.
I really like this stuff. Dave hasn't tried it yet. This is just the traditional Honey Mountain wine. It's straight mead. There's no added vanillas or fruits or cinnamon or anything. Although I will say their vanilla cinnamon is definitely worth drinking. It's a fantastic drink as well. But without further ado and us droning on, what do you say we crack open?
And as I understand, this is a high ABV one as well.
Yeah, this
So-
one is 12%.
12%. So I tend to like the higher alcohol ones with a little bit of warmth in it. So man, I'm excited. It is Viking night at Cask Talk. So I'm super excited. So I'll go ahead and start. Actually, you know what? Hold on a second here. This doesn't work. I'm gonna set that aside. This is gonna work, right? So if we're gonna drink a Viking drink, we've got to drink it out of a Viking horn. What do you think?
Well, I guess I'm just not that snobby. I'll drink out of a sifter.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Now the downside is I don't know if I can see it in this.
Yeah, don't pour off too much here. You can get some more in there.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put a little bit more in there.
There you go. That's what it just
There
sounded
we go. So a little bit harder to tell some of the things that I typically measure. Thank you, Josh. Hopefully you're subscribing as well.
So one thing I will say is that it's not going to taste that much like honey. Much like wine doesn't taste that much like grapes. And it is a bit on the acquired side, but I will say I drink this not just because I like the flavor. I also drink this because every different kind of alcohol drink has its own drunk, and to me this is a very happy-go-lucky drunk. So if I'm drinking it and I've had a few, you know I'm in a great mood no matter what.
The term honeymoon was driven because it was common to drink mead on your honeymoon. So they would call it a honeymoon.
Makes sense to me.
If not, it's a great story.
Now, I love the way this stuff smells. It's kind of warm.
It's very floral.
It's floral. It's got a little hint of honey behind it. It's great.
It's almost like perfumey at some level, but not like in a really negative way.
You can see there, that it's actually pretty clear, although it's not really.
Though actually, you know what's really cool is if you just look right at that edge, you can see the legs on it. And you'll find that in wine. You don't really find that as much with beer, though you'll find a little bit of syrupiness. But you'll see the legs. If you just slightly turn it and slightly put it there, you can see that it kind of takes its time kind of coming down that glass.
Yep, it is thick. There is some viscosity there. I enjoy this stuff. And you can tell in this one because they have a 7 parts orange blossom and 2 parts wildflower.
Mm-hmm.
You pick up a lot of the citrus notes out of this.
Yeah, orange blossom is a really great honey for making mead. So if you're ever looking at making your first mead, orange blossom is a good way to do. Paul and I, in fact, we actually made a mead together at one point.
Yeah, that was years ago.
Years ago, we absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And it was sulfite free as well. Has some sweetness to it though. That is really, really good. So being something sulfite free, higher in alcohol.
Yeah, it's got a pleasant sweetness. Mead in general, it pairs amazingly with chocolate. So if you like chocolate bars, this is a great, have a chocolate bar with the mead. Something about the two of them are just kind of complementary because the chocolate's a little on the bitter side, this is a little on the sweet and tart side.
This is really good. I really enjoyed it. It's certainly warm. You really get the warmth from it. You get a lot of the sweet. You get a little that floral smell. You're also picking up that floral taste in it, and probably from the orange blossom. And they're probably doing a little bit of balancing with the wildflower.
It's probably
7-part orange blossom, 2-part wildflower, I think is what the recipe calls for. Not really picking up any yeast notes. It is really floral from the honey. It's almost like when you're drinking a wine where it's really clean like that, and you're really picking up that sweetness of the berries, but in this scenario, the honey.
Myself, when we come to scoring this, presentation rating, I would give it, I probably wouldn't really give it a very high one because it doesn't really look too appealing. It just kind of looks like a yellowy white wine for the most part, but it does smell really good. So I'll give it about a 6 on the presentation.
Okay. I'm probably going to just increase a little bit from that. I'm going to give it an 8. And the reason why, if you don't mind if I borrow this glass real quick, is I love that. You know, that's one of the big measures when you're looking at those kind of legs on it, the syrupiness. It's got a great smell. Obviously, you're not going to get ahead with it. I think that presents really well, and if I'm drinking, those are things that I'm going to be interacting with, I'm going to be looking at, I'm going to be enjoying. You can almost, with like a wine, and also I'm sure this mead, you could probably sit there for a good amount of time, not even drinking it, just smelling it, and really just kind of enjoying it. This kind of hits that piece where it's got a really cool floral smell to it, and it's got a lot of depth in that florality.
All right, so for taste, I'm going to give it a good solid 8.5. And I've had drinks I like better than this. I've had drinks I like less than this. Definitely a lot of drinks I've had less than this, but this is not like a perfect drink to me, but this is something that I very much enjoy from time to time. In fact, it's probably one of the few things you'll find in my refrigerator pretty much any given point in time is some mead.
I'm gonna probably go with the 8.5 as well. I think that's fair. I love the taste. I love the sweetness to it. So obviously 8.5 is a high rating for me. I love the sweetness. That is more towards my taste than some of the bitterness that we'll find. I really like the florality of it. And I'm gonna just throw in there that overall, I'm probably going to say I think that they hit it on the head. I don't taste any off flavors to it. It's really a great drink. I enjoy it. I think that they make it very, very, very well. This is a great example. And if you have never had a mead before, Redstone's a great company. They're based out of Boulder, Colorado. I believe they even use Colorado water, which is magical.
More beer pee. More beer pee.
That's an ongoing joke between Paul and I. I'm going to give it an 8.5 on my overall as well.
I'm going to go with an 8.5 overall too. And part of it is, the warmth and, things that's kind of hard to quantify really. It's an enjoyable drink to me. It's an enjoyable time, and like I said, if I pair it with chocolate, it's freaking fantastic. As far as my personal preference, I'm actually going to go a 9.5. And I think it's a combination of the flavor, the fact that it does have the right amount of dryness to me. I do tend to prefer stuff on the drier side. The fact that I've discovered how well it paired with chocolate, but honestly, you could substitute this in for almost any wine, really, any white wine or rose wine.
I would enjoy this more than a white wine. It has a lot of those same kind of characteristics where it's a little bit more on the sweetness side. It's got a good dryness to it. Maybe not as dry as a Chardonnay.
The reason I'm going for that 9.5 on that is because, like I said, it's a very, very pleasant drunk. You don't want to get too much of it in. It'll kick your butt before you know it, but as far as you just want to have a good time, be social, just kind of enjoy yourself, this is a very pleasant drunk.
I'm going to give it a 9 purely because if I was looking at a huge flight of different options, there's a good chance
you'd go with this?
That I'm going to go with a Mead, and I'm going to go with this if it's available. So I thought it was a really great drink.
I've gotten to the point where I can actually taste the sulfites. They have a sweet, lingering aftertaste. It's kind of hard to describe, but I can actually tell when they're in there just based on drinking whatever it is that contains them. So the fact that this doesn't have that in there also really makes me happy because that's not a pleasant flavor to me.
Well, hey, thank you for checking in on us, especially on our Mead episode. I would love to hear your guys' experience on your Meads. If you have a Mead that you absolutely love,
yeah, any
let
suggestion.
us know. Give us a suggestion to it.
If we can order it, we will.
I would love to hear what you guys think is great Mead. We would love to give an opportunity to do it here on the channel. Please, also, we're growing our channel. We need your support to do it. It can't happen with just our support.
Yep.
It's got to be your
subscribe,
support.
Share.
Please like, subscribe, share it to your friends. Say nice things about us, and we'll say nice things about you.
Send us some beer to try.
Yeah.
We're open to being sponsored that way.
Yeah, if you want to sponsor an episode, let us know. We're also going to be trying to do a few other things, obviously, as well. We want to try to do some brewing. We're going to try to get out in the world a little bit and visit some of our friends at some different breweries and maybe do some on-site episodes. So we'd love to be part of your brewery or your favorite brewery as well. So give us some suggestions on that. Thank you guys for checking in. Like, subscribe, share.
Cheers.
Skål.